Alex Rowley to be followed by Stuart Stevenson.
Presiding Officer, I'm pleased to speak in this debate today on the conclusion of the report on salmon farming in Scotland by the Rural Economy and Connectivity Committee. I have a particular interest in this report as I sat on the Environment Committee when its inquiry went on into the environmental impacts of salmon farming in Scotland. While listening to the evidence and reading up on the issues, I found myself shocked by some of the concerns that were being raised. As someone who ate salmon on a very regular basis, I have to say the levels of disease, mortality and the use of harmful chemicals used in the treatment of disease has certainly left me very concerned. Given that farmed Atlantic salmon is Scotland's and the UK's largest food export, and that Scotland is the largest producer in the whole of the EU, I think that addressing the failings in the industry should be an absolute priority. That is not to be negative about the industry. Surely that is common sense if we want the industry to grow. In truth, this is an industry that has shown it cannot self-regulate, and is why we need and must demand much stronger regulation and action from the Scottish Government. The report we are debating today makes that point when it says, and I quote, "The same set of concerns regarding the environmental impact of salmon farming exists now as in 2002, but the scale and impact of these has expanded since 2002. There has been a lack of progress in tackling many of the key issues previously identified, and unacceptable levels of mortality persist. It is clear that something is not right if the problems in the industry are still present nearly 20 years later, and in fact are getting worse. That is why I think it is incredibly important that the Scottish Government take note of the recommendations of this report today, and the recommendations from the Environmental Committee as well, both of which highlight a desperate need for urgency in tackling the problems of intensive farming, sea lice, disease and escapes from farmed fish. These problems mean questions need to be raised around the issue of transparency and the publication of data, which is raised by both committee reports. By making data around mortalities, sea lice, disease and escapes more transparent, we will be able to get a much clearer picture of what is actually going on in this industry. The public have a right to know what chemicals are being used in these farms and the impact of those chemicals in lochs across Scotland, as well as in our food. The committee report also highlights action that can be taken now to address and alleviate these problems. The Scottish Government could commit to the development and introduction of full closed contaminated farming. I recognise this would need further research, but by outlining a realistic target for this, the Scottish Government would be taking a bold step and showing a commitment to addressing the negative effects of salmon farming on wild stocks. The questions around the pace of growth in the salmon industry remain with very real concerns that the industry must get its act together before any major expansion takes place. This again would show commitment to tackling the issues so that in another 20 years we are not simply talking about the problems that exist now. With regard to the concerns raised about the impact of salmon farms on wild stock, it is clear that the Scottish Government has not understood and appreciated the urgency of the situation in merely talking about a mechanism to inform the longer-term determination of a regulatory framework in this area, and a staged approach to building a long-term set of arrangements to fill the current regulatory gap. Indeed, these are not my words, but the words of the Salmon and Trout Conservation Scotland. They are very clear that the Scottish Government response shows a general lack of urgency in key areas, and what is required is urgent action and enforcement to control the negative impacts of the salmon farming industry. there is an opportunity for the Scottish Government to show leadership by taking on board the recommendations of both the committee reports. MSPs, the Salmon and Trout Conservation Scotland state, MSPs should be suspicious of announcements of further working groups on fish health or further repeat reviews of existing licensing and permitting designed to kick the committee's concerns into the long grass. We have been there before. The time is now for action, not words. I do hope the Scottish Government will realise the seriousness of this situation and take the action that is necessary.